Welcome everybody to a new episode of Rocket Lab Weekly. This is episode 34 of 34 straight weeks of doing Rocket Lab Weekly. And today is a very special episode because I started Rocket Lab Weekly with a fantastic gentleman he's called Managing Partner at Matti Capital. And he's back for an episode. So it feels like the old times. Welcome back.
Thank you. I paid you to say those kind words. So your check is in the mail.
Okay, good. Awesome. So it's a crazy day for me. This is my third stream today on YouTube. I think for you also. It's you were also on Rocket Lab, on Palantir Weekly. Then we did the live stream of the launch together.
Yeah, within the last 24 hours, yes. And then I think I actually did one as well. So I guess this is my fourth within the last 24 hours because I did one on my own channel just to chat for an hour.
Wow. Yeah. So we're crazy over here, and you beat me again, but that's okay. That's okay.
It's not a competition.
So we had a super successful launch today, and I'm just gonna share. Sorry, let me put it on the screen. So it was the pre-fire launch. I'm curious in the comments, guys, if you can say if you watched the launch or didn't. What's really interesting for me is that this is supposed to be a back-to-back launch for NASA, and we can get an announcement at any point when the next launch is happening, and it should be in the next couple of days. And on Monday, the market is closed, and if they would launch on Monday, then it would be the first time that Rocket Lab had two launches while the market is closed. So we always joke about how Rocket Lab falls after a rocket launch. So we're gonna see if it double falls, if it's two launches or not. But and any thoughts, Mr. Matt, on the recent happenings? And
yeah, I was really hoping that they would do something like literally surprising, like, oh, we actually have one later today. But unfortunately that wasn't the case. I know it was going to be a tight turnaround. They did a similar one, I believe, last year around this time as well, where they were able to get two off within a week's time period. So I'm just trying to see the cadence shrink, but at this time, I don't think it's necessarily Rocket Lab that's holding back the timeline, as we've kind of discussed with Peter, and as we've kind of heard on the conference calls. He's really putting it back on the partners to say, hey, get your damn equipment ready so we can launch off as fast as possible. So it seems like, though, based off of what I've seen from the social media postings for Prefire, that both satellites are done. So I'm hoping within the next couple of days, I'm sure they're just trying to find the appropriate weather window to be able to launch off. But yeah, it'll be exciting to see two launches in quick succession, get number 7 off for the year, and hopefully we can try to climb ourselves back up to close to 20 launches for the year. I'm still not 100% certain we'll get there, but I'm aiming between 15 to 20. So hopefully we can get to 20.
Yeah, I was also going to say that for the viewers who are newer, we did an interview with Peter Beck, me and Matt, where Peter Beck actually explained that we don't need to worry about the rocket launches and like if there is delays, because Rocket Lab collects 90% of the revenue before the rocket launches, but it doesn't get recognized onto the P&L. And if there is a delay, these launches don't disappear. So actually, after the interview, I calmed down a lot about launches. And I think it's more important to track how much they are selling on the launches. Because this one is actually a prime example of what Peter was saying, that it's the customers who are not ready, because this pre-fire launch was rescheduled actually in August from May. And then it was like deleted from the launch manifest, and then it was brought back into May for some very mysterious reason. We don't know what happened, and Rocket Lab was able to launch it, no problem. So it's just proof that when there is these delays, it's not that Rocket Lab is not churning out rockets out of the factory, or they are having some issues. It's just the customers not showing up with their satellites. Cool. So there was a lot of news this week that is more space industry related. I want to thank Francisco Ramirez for posting a lot of articles and a lot of very interesting information. And I have a new conspiracy theory, and I'm calling it a conspiracy theory because I want to make sure everybody understands that this is my speculation. But based on reading the articles that Francisco was sending, I think I have an idea what the space infrastructure, the first space infrastructure structure will be for Rocket Lab. So we can go through these articles really quick with Matt, and then we can discuss with you. And I'm very curious to see your opinion on it. So, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's do it. It'll be fun.
Yeah. So the first news is actually a fake news that we need to cover. So I think you also saw that SpaceX weighs in a plan to sell shares valuing the firm at 200 billion. And I was going like, oh my God, how is Rocket Lab valued as low as they are if SpaceX just keeps blowing up? And then this thing got community noted. So I just want to clear it up with everybody that the community note says that this is false. And Bloomberg has taken down the post after Elon confirmed that SpaceX will not be selling shares. So that with that one out of the way, I want to show you the news. So Francisco shared this tweet. It's a... The US government is basically saying that just last week on May 16, Russia launched a satellite into low Earth orbit that the United States assesses is likely a counter space weapon, presumably capable of attacking other satellites. I'm curious, Matt, do you know what technology, like, have you heard about this before? What tech are these killing satellites using, and what is your opinion on this?
No, I mean, I don't necessarily have an opinion as to what the weapon that might be being used is, but, I think this is, how do I say this appropriately? I think it's rather propaganda-like to post something like this and try to instill fear in the American people. What do you think all these tranches of SDA equipment that we're putting up into space is, right? It's the exact same sort of thing. Counter space weapons, whether or not they can attack other vehicles or not, I guess is left to be explored still. But you could say the same exact thing. Here we are cheering on these SDA contracts that we get for Rocket Lab, and there's a hint of any sort of Russia satellites.
Yeah, I mean, the way I understand the SDA is that it's more reconnaissance, but I mean, it like they're not gonna tell us, right? Like if they're like, this is a space weapon we're putting up, we're not gonna know about it. But continue. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I mean, I don't have much else to say, but I think that this is just another reason why I think partnering with the Space Force and continuing the SDA contracts is vital. I think that this is going to happen more and more so. If this isn't already happening with, say, China or some of the other countries that have a lot of space capability, it will happen. And so I think it's just continued to be vital to be strong in space and maintain our dominance in that respect, as we have since the 60s. And that's all I can really say about it. I think it's inevitable. How realistic this is, or if it's just something that's trying to instill fear in the American people, I don't know. But I think there's a reason why we are setting up a space layer for first layer defense, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about these satellites, right, is that before you had these geostationary satellites that were super expensive to launch. They were 36,000 kilometers away from Earth. And the problem with them is that, one, they're super expensive, and number two is that you only need, like, I think 3 is enough to cover all of Earth at once. And then they're very easy military targets. I don't know if you can say that because they are orbiting 27,000 kilometers per hour. I don't know how easy it is to shoot it, but it's still only 3 targets, right? If you can say that. And so the trend is that we're going down to low Earth orbit, and then you need a lot more satellites to be produced and shipped up. And then instead of 3 satellites, your constellation is suddenly 150 satellites. And then even if a space weapon shoots down, I don't know, 3 or 5 satellites, your system is still quite intact. Okay, so keep this in mind as we go into the next article. So here's one. DoD forecasts about 1.7 billion in commercial SATCOM buys over the coming years. So here I just want to show some key points. So the U.S. Space Force Commercial Satellite Communication Office unveiled projections for satellite communication contracts expected to be awarded over the next 12 months. The combined opportunities are potentially worth nearly 1.7 billion. The largest potential deal is 900 million over 7 years for secure satellite communication services for U.S. government aircraft that transport the nation's highest ranking officials and military leaders. The way I translate this is that they want to put up a constellation that is a communication constellation that is only for secure communication for the U.S. Like the highest ranking U.S. officials. Do you think that this is the right way to understand this?
I think it's an interpretation of it. I don't think that it's necessarily, I'm not sure if you're trying to link this as to this is specifically what Rocket Lab is trying to create as their, I guess, new
maybe I'm not giving my theory yet. I'm just saying that, like, they're putting stuff in space that is supposed to be a constellation, and it does this. And I'm sure that Rocket Lab is going to bid for this program, right?
For sure. Yeah, I think that this just goes back to the continued cooperation with the DoD and the Space Force of trying to put in the appropriate sophistication within space to be able to have NATO as well as the United States, specifically Western countries, I will say, to continue their dominance, right? I don't think that this is anything too different.
Yeah, and also what's interesting is in the latest talks, Adam Spice said that their hockey stick is going to be the government. And he mentioned that they are after a lot of contracts that are the same or bigger than the SDA. And we're going to see what happens. But we continue with these articles. So here's another one, Marine Corps Enterprise SATCOM. So this is like highlighting from the 1.7 billion, like what is the 2 biggest contracts, and then I guess there's other smaller ones. So another massive procurement on the horizon is a potential, basically 500 million contract over 7 years for a program known as U.S. Marine Corps Enterprise Commercial Satellite Services. Yeah, like it goes into a little bit detail that is over my head, but again, the way I understand is that the Marine Corps is going to shoot up stuff that is going to be used as their own constellation for communication. The next article is another very interesting. This is from yesterday actually. So the U.S. seeks bids from satellite manufacturers for military space test program. The U.S. Space Force is soliciting bids from commercial satellite manufacturers for a 10-year procurement of small satellites to carry experimental payloads to space. The Space Test Program Office issued a final request for proposals. This is an indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity deal. And there was one part that I should have highlighted for me that I really wanted to show you guys. So basically in the program, it was saying that they're looking for small satellite here under this program, which they're calling the step 2.0. The military is seeking commercial satellite providers that can deliver a steady cadence of small standardized satellite buses capable of hosting various technology experiments. And then later it was saying that they have had a lot of scheduling challenges with, not being able to match the satellites with the rocket providers. And I was just thinking, this one has Rocket Lab written all over it. And I think we have a high chance of winning this one. So do you have anything to add to this, or?
Yeah, I mean, nothing too extravagant. I think Rocket Lab's gonna try their hand at any sort of contract that they can, especially if they think they have an advantage.
Yeah,
the SDA is something they're continuing to look at as well, right? So I think any sort of contracts they can get their hands on, I think are up for grabs, and I think Rocket Lab is well poised to be able to take on those opportunities as they come.
Yeah. So here's a very interesting article. Here I highlighted certain stuff. So New Zealand quietly is added to the US military trade law. This article is from 2 days ago. And basically what this contract did is, including New Zealand, allowed the continuation of existing technological cooperation and also ensured that developing bilateral space cooperation was possible. The Congress explainer said that this was about supplying military operations, conducting advanced research and development, and systems development to ensure technological superiority of the U.S. Armed Forces, securing reliable sources of critical materials, developing industrial preparedness to support operations in wartime and during national emergency. Members have been involved in F-35 Joint Strike Fighter program. So here we go. The Pentagon is only allowed to buy satellite star trackers and certain naval components from approved NTIB manufacturers. So that's the program that New Zealand was approved in. Dual-use technologies that also have one non-military uses are a focus. So this seems to make it easier for the US military to buy things from New Zealand and to share technology from New Zealand. And it specifically mentions the space industry. And I mean, Rocket Lab is New Zealand's space industry. So the only way I can understand this contract is that the US government is gearing up to more collaboration with Rocket Lab and making it easier for itself to, buy stuff from Rocket Lab. Do you think that this is a crazy assumption, or what?
No, I don't think it's a crazy assumption. I think the thing that confuses me the most is earlier in the article, it talks about how it didn't really have New Zealand government consent to kind of just write that in. Like the US just kind of wrote it in and didn't really like inform the New Zealand government. But I guess if you're not really working with their government per se, and you're just dealing with Rocket Lab, then I guess that's all you really need, is to inform, say, Rocket Lab that this is something that you're, considering to be able to help with, I guess, creating opportunities to make their satellites better, right? So I don't know, but I did think it was a little strange how New Zealand wasn't involved as a country, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I actually was thinking about writing to Rocket Lab to ask if because this allows them, it says in the article, to share military technologies. And I'm like, does this, because the Rocket Lab engineers are under this ITAR restrictions, meaning that the New Zealand engineers are able to share information with the US engineers. I think it's only about rocket engines, but the US rocket engine people are not able to share any data with New Zealand. And I wonder if this lifts that one, because I heard that they were trying to simplify it and they were trying to find solutions on this, because they found, like many politicians found, that this actually hinders research and is not beneficial as it is. So yeah, I should probably write to Rocket Lab about this and see if they answer on this. So we go on to the next one. This is an article from also a few days ago. You guys can see a lot happened this week when it comes to space. So space officials outline key investments needed to ensure US maintains edge. So the Defense Department remains focused on maintaining its edge in space as competitors attempt to shift the balance in the domain, top space officials from the Pentagon said today. And this is what they said: "We are clearly in a time of rapid change in the space strategic environment, one that does not favor slow or those resistant to change. Efforts by China and Russia to rapidly field space and counterspace capabilities meant to degrade and challenge the joint venture's use of space-based services that provide warfighters with key advantages on the battlefield." So basically, this is just saying that the US government is aware that there is threats coming from China and Russia, and that we need to speed up research. We need to basically find companies that can make satellites fast and deliver satellites fast. I think this was the last government-related article. And have you seen, Matt, lately the articles that were coming out about how the space agency is trying to make agreements that they are able to use non-commercial, like commercial satellites for military purposes, like that they would have a dual use, and they're trying to explore, because, like, for example, if Starlink is allowed to be used for military purpose, right, then it makes Starlink a military target, and then they feel that then Starlink needs to get like reimbursed for this extra risk that they have. Have you seen these articles?
No, I have not.
Okay. So now we come to my conspiracy theory, because I think that there is a hockey stick coming in the US government, and I think that the first space infrastructure that Rocket Lab could and should deploy, that would be the ultimate Rocket Lab way, is that they create a constellation for some US government purpose that then they have the ability to reuse for other things, right? So let's say that they would make a communication satellite that can provide internet and secure communications for, let's say, the Marine Corps, what we saw in the article. But they have the permission by the US government to also commercially use it, and then basically Rocket Lab would have a paid for space constellation up in space that they're able to resell to other commercial uses. And it's just an idea that I got after reading these contracts, but I feel that it's highly likely that could be the case. Curious if you think this is total like fantasy, or if it has.
I don't think it's fantasy. I've envisioned something, I don't want to say completely similar, but what I've envisioned is the ability for some of these satellites to have multi-purpose ability, meaning they have the ability to take photos at a very high level. I'm thinking like Black Sky does, I'm thinking of, there's been a lot of what we've seen already, which is a lot of weather monitoring, chemical monitoring for Earth, like the methane sat. And so for that, like the tropics as well. So I think that there's an ongoing theme that I believe Rocket Lab is seeing, which is having a satellite that has capability to do a multitude, if not all these things all in one, and have them basically stationed, hundreds of them around the world. And as they are needed, they can lease those out for set periods of time, or the information out for set periods of time to these companies. And I think what would end up happening is it would remove a lot of the excess folks that are unfortunately are out there, like Syndicate, Black Sky, and all those revenues would then be floating directly through to Rocket Lab. And then all Rocket Lab really has to do is keep an eye on that entire like blanket of satellites. And as one kind of comes down or loses and comes to the end of its life, they have the capability to launch more. That's kind of what I've seen. I haven't thought about the communication piece though, like satellite communication between specific air forces and stuff like that, or specific troops or anything like that, like a secure sort of communication line. So that's something I haven't really thought of. So yeah, that one's a new one.
I was basically sure that they would not do communications, right? But when I was reading these articles, and I'm like, yeah, but if they get paid like to do a satellite constellation and it's already with communications, then they can sell it to other people if it's deemed a commercial, like if it goes into this program with the army, that the army is footing half the bill because it makes it a military satellite, so that like they have to reimburse Rocket Lab for it, but they're free to also sell it to other players who want to use it. It would be like this ultimate, like we didn't have money, so we had to think, and like it would be a very, very smart solution on like I feel it would be a total Rocket Lab move if they would do it like that.
Yeah, I think it'll be an interesting year. I anticipate we'll find out more. It'll probably be strategic as to knocking out Neutron and getting that on the pad, and then obviously from what our conversation was with Peter, he talked a lot about how 50% of the Falcon 9 missions are really held up by Starlink, and the other 50% are customers. And so if you think about it in that respect, I'd anticipate that they're going to try to do something similar with Neutron, and so obviously you need to get Neutron up and off the ground before you can kind of release the satellite constellation that they're kind of taking under. That's just my kind of thought. So I'm anticipating within the next 12 months we'll start to hear something.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to know that, for example, one of these in one of these articles, like the announcement of who's winning the article is in September. And we know that I think that there is some other government contracts that soon have their announcements. And it's pretty crazy with Rocket Lab that we can wake up like any day and then the stock can be up like 20-30%. It's probably gone in the, like it will probably shoot up 20% and then 5 days later it's back in the same range. But still, maybe one day the market wakes up and they don't just sell off on good news. So it's very exciting times. Okay, so we go on to the next topic. We touched a little bit on this in our live stream. We start with this meme. Another one bites the dust. Firefly is going on sale for 1.5 billion. And what happened? So I tried to do a little bit of research before this live, and I'm not 100% convinced that the fact that they're considering this sale means that the company itself is in trouble. I found this article, Firefly Aerospace considers 1.5 billion sale. And it confirms, as Matt said, that they have received a total of 572 million in funding. And it's so interesting that this article says that they are experts in small launch and medium launch vehicles, and they have a moon lander. And I'm like, yeah, are they really like, they don't really have any medium launch vehicle that is flying. They don't have a small vehicle that is flying. The lunar lander is under development, and that's a crazy lot of things to do at the same time. So Matt, I know we talked about this a little bit, but do you think that this is a desperate move? Do you think that this is a strategic move and they're not actually in trouble? And is this good or bad for Rocket Lab?
I mean, are they desperate? I don't know. Desperate's the right term, but they've only raised 572 million, and as you've kind of already alluded to, they're trying to do a small launch, medium launch, as well as a lunar lander. To kind of relate that back to Rocket Lab, the Neutron vehicle alone will cost about 300 to 350 million, of which 200 to 250 million is coming out of Rocket Lab's pocket. The remainder is coming out of, say, NASA or whomever is help subsidizing the cost of Neutron. So you think about it, just in that alone, 572 million, there's obviously the run rate that Firefly has, coupled with, let's just say, the medium launch vehicle design that they're coming up with. Desperate, I don't know, but $572 million when you're in this business is not a lot, especially if you're also trying to design a lunar lander and you've had very few successful small launch successes in getting to orbit. So to me, I think it's stating, you've invested $572 million. You are getting to it at a slower pace than was probably forecasted or promised originally by the organization. If somebody wants to pick it up for 1.5, they would be very happy because they'd probably walk away with 150% return on their money without eroding really that massive amounts of potential capital. However, I don't see how this company can persist with only raising $572 million for the next 12 to 18 months, specifically when they're trying to nail down 3 particular sort of different avenues, right? Where they're trying to do small launch, medium launch, as well as lunar landers. So I know that is a thing that's going to partially hurt Rocket Lab because Rocket Lab is partnering with them on the Blue Ghost lunar lander. I forget. I think they're helping provide software and a few other things for the Blue Ghost lunar lander. But overall, I think if you think about it in that perspective, Rocket Lab has way more capital. You're a very popular man on WhatsApp, I'll just say. Or is that just me?
No, you hear this beep also?
Yes.
I thought it was coming from you.
No, maybe it is.
I'm not getting WhatsApp.
Interesting. Maybe it is me. I'm not getting any messages. I just thought you were very popular. So yeah, I mean, I think it's an attempt. I think the problem is that there's too many other people for sale right now. Astra's probably listing things up for sale. You're going to have several other companies that are probably listing themselves as well. ULA has been on the for sale list for a while. And so I think if anything, at least from what we've seen with Rocket Lab, they prefer to buy things on the secondary market after they've kind of been chopped up. And I don't think Rocket Lab would be like, yeah, let's spend $1.5 billion or take on the debt. I think that they would wait for bankruptcy to happen and then pick and choose what exact assets that they would want from the folks that are splitting it up and divvying it up, just like they did with Virgin Orbit. So, to me, it sucks because, you have this ability to say work on a lunar lander with Firefly, being Rocket Lab being able to help a Firefly, and it might not end up happening. The thing that I could see though is if they do have those plans, I don't know how symbiotic the plans would be of being able to say pick up the plans for the lunar lander and then for a fraction of the cost or the IP and help deliver that. And that could just be another thing within Rocket Lab's kind of repertoire of IP. So that's something I'm thinking about as well. And also the potential for the actual factories themselves to be able to help expand satellite production, rocket production, medium launch vehicle production, all that sort of stuff. But to me, I don't think Rocket Lab would be in the market for like a $1.5 billion acquisition. So, and I don't think a lot of people are, right? I think people would probably want to pick and choose a fraction of those things. So unless maybe you're Bezos or something, $1.5 billion isn't a lot to you. I don't think there's any other companies really that are in the financial position to really double down and say, yep, we'll pay the $1.5 billion. Like Relativity doesn't have the cash. ULA is trying to market themselves, so why would they get involved? I really think the only person that they're hoping to market to is really to Bezos.
But it's so interesting because what use is it to him if he buys up? Because if these companies, let's say like Firefly, right? Let's say they have a $2 billion backlog. I don't know if they do. We don't have information. So one value would be like if you buy them and cancel everything, you can just have at their backlog and fly their contracts, right? But if you just let them die, then you anyways like that backlog goes. So like you understand, like I'm not sure how much sense it makes to buy revenue, like 1.5 billion revenue with 1.5 billion dollars. Like it doesn't feel like, and it's the same with ULA. Like I heard that Blue Origin would be interested in ULA because of the government contracts that it has, and I think it has. What is the backlog of ULA? I think it's 2-3 billion. No,
it sounds about right. Yeah.
And then I'm like, what's the point of buying them for 5 billion or 4 billion to get at the backlog of 2-3 billion?
You say that, but if you have the excess capital, it's more about consolidation and it's more about ensuring that your company survives. So if you have the excess $1.5 billion, to be able to ensure that you get those contracts, you might say it's only 2 to 3 billion, but if you build that relationship and that relationship persists for 20 odd years, it could be 20 to $50 billion worth of actual backlog that eventually flows through. And it also prevents somebody else from getting it. So I think it all depends on people didn't like when I used this chess versus checkers analogy in my Rocket Lab video the other day, but I think if you have the capital, sometimes it's worthwhile to just buy out some of those contracts to be able to have them in-house so that somebody else doesn't get them. Because some people are starving, right? Like Relativity is starving right now. Astra, 6 months to a year ago would have been starving for some of these additional contracts. Rocket Lab, on the other hand, they've been able to stand on their own 2 feet and they have $550 million in the bank. But I'm sure they would love to have an additional $1 billion worth of backlog. And you just heard Spice talk about how they're at $1 billion. They want to get to 2 billion as quickly as possible. So in terms of backlog. So anyway, it's just some food for thought. But to me, the company is going to have to get split up if they don't sell within the next 12 months. And I think that that's their hope, is that they'd be able to do it. And I guess another piece is would they allow maybe some of the European companies to be able to purchase some of the IP as well? That I don't know, because Europe is also in this race with this as well, regardless of whether or not they've been very successful. But I don't know, just based off of trade agreements, if they would have let that happen.
Yeah. I mean, Europe only has like, what is the company called? We don't have a big space. Like we have a space industry, but I think it's a lot of very small players, except for the I just lost the name. The French, like the ones who launched James Webb, the Orion 5. Who's if someone in the comments can help me out, who is that company? Another thing, did you see that? Okay, so Dave put out a poll. Which company is worth more? Do you think United or should, like, which one do you value more, United Launch Alliance or Relativity Space? Someone in the comments said ESA, but ESA is like the European Space Agency. That's like the NASA in US. And so Relativity Space is believed to be currently valued at 4.2 billion, while as ULA is believed to be going on sale for between 2 to 4 billion. Can you make any sense of Relativity's valuation?
I think there's a difference between what a market cap is versus a valuation. And there's a fine line difference, right? I think the way that you have to think about it is what that 4.2 billion is likely to be is based off the last time they got, let's just say, a Series C, Series D funding. And how
you're correct.
Yeah, and how delayed is that from current valuation, right? Just like how when you think about it, the Rocket Lab, I believe Rocket Lab. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just here is the like it's from January 9, 2024.
Mm-hmm. But that was from the funding round in 2021. Yeah, I mean the article was written then, but if you look at 4.2 flat with its last funding round in 2021. So that's the previous time that it was really valued at that. You look at, say, what Rocket Lab came out of the market with as a SPAC. It was valued in $5.5 billion, and it went public at $10 billion, with $900 million in the bank after de-SPAC, and selling at about a $10 share price, etc. And we know what's kind of transpired since then. Obviously, we're now valued at about $2 billion, right? So if you think about it, there's a difference between a valuation, which back then for Rocket Lab, it was a $5.5 billion valuation. But in terms of reality, when it comes to what the market cap is, what it is trading on the public markets, to me, that's what's more realistic, because that's in reality, let's just say, what the public would trade for it versus what private markets would trade for it. And so there's a whole back market that we don't get involved in, which is like this VC venture capitalist market, where there's an argument between the founders, or not, I won't say argument, but an amicable agreement signed between the venture capitalists that want to invest money into the company for a certain percentage, and obviously the entrepreneurs themselves that are helping launch these things. To me, if you ask me, ULA is a machine, right? Like ULA, the Delta IV rocket was a very successful campaign for them. Now they have the Orion. That's going to be extremely successful for them if they continue that in the future. Relativity's launched one rocket, and then they put it on pause. They're not developing that original Terran 1 rocket anymore. They're going for a medium launch rocket. So to me, they don't even have a successful backlog of rocket launches to be able to be valued at $4 billion. So anyway,
they supposedly have, I think, like over 2 billion in backlog, which also is something that doesn't make any sense to me. Meaning, that Rocket Lab always stresses that they only count like real backlog. And we have discovered that, certain things are missing from the backlog. Like, for example, they announced in the last quarter that they got 150 million solar deal, but only 30 million was included in the backlog because that's the part that was enforceably ordered, right? So this 2 billion in launch backlog is probably someone saying like they got a discount and they said, guys, if you fly this and you fit into the schedule, then we can get you 20 more flights for this and then they're like, okay, we include that in the backlog. I think. Okay, cool. So that was the space industry in general. Now, an interesting thing I want to go over to, and that's a little bit of SpaceX and NASA and cost overruns and how capital intense the space industry is. So NASA defends the Artemis cost and schedule amid planning of possible changes. So in this article, what has shocked me is that SLS, I believe, so far has cost about 10 point something billion. The budget was extended to be another 10 billion and up to 2028, whereas SpaceX is developing Starship, and SpaceX is paying the 10 billion for developing, so not the US government, and the US government is only going to buy the actual launches, which we think is going to be 100 million a piece for launch, and then SpaceX has to earn back the development cost as they launch their own satellites, commercial satellites, and for the government. And here in this article, they did a calculation that the first 4 launches of the SLS, it will cost, including the Orion to the moon, like 4.2 billion each, compared to 100 million with SpaceX. So, any thoughts regarding that? And yeah, I'm curious what you think about this.
I'm curious what you think. I don't really have an opinion on it much.
I mean, I think that the government is basically phasing out this old cost plus contracts, and that they are doing their own procurement. So instead of, because I believe that the SLS was the last time that they went to a company and said that we want a rocket and you build this rocket for us and we pay for the development costs, because it's like an utter shock to me how expensive it is compared to just like buying from commercial players. And I think that there was a lot of lobby power, because, you know, like if you buy the SLS, it's like the space industrial complex. It's in a lot of states and a lot of senators, and you know, like this money goes to their constituents, and, you know, for paying for engineers. And if they would buy everything from SpaceX, then it's, yeah, like some states lose out on a lot of business. But I mean, when there is such a cost difference, you can't really argue with the cost. And then on top of it, it's very delayed. And also Starliner with Boeing, they also had quite some issues this week that I wanted to show, that after much delay, they might miss the launch window, both for the rocket and for the Starliner. And it's crazy how somehow this government connected side is not able to move with the schedules and the budgets.
Yeah, I think they're too, what's the word I'm looking for?
Like the culture maybe is not like,
yeah,
it's too...
I think that's a good way to put it. I think it's, you know, a lot of these partnerships were created back in a time when you didn't have really bootstrap sort of cultures like you do Rocket Lab and SpaceX. And I want, before I continue on, I said Orion earlier. I meant the Vulcan rocket, not Orion. The thing that I was referring to with respect to the culture, though, I think a lot of these companies were just handed NASA contracts in the past and can just work them as they see fit and at will. And I think now you have these companies that are new age, and they're really trying to get it done as fast as possible and really push the limits as to what's possible. And that's really leaving companies like ULA and Boeing and all these other folks that are used to just operating at their own pace behind. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the fact that, like you stated, the culture is different. These guys are literally trying to push into the new frontier. I think also you have a lot of the government red tape that was probably built into those companies as well. Over decades of regulatory environments that, unfortunately slowed those guys down to the fact where they're probably trying to over-engineer a lot of these things. Versus a Rocket Lab and SpaceX, they're starting from the ground up, not having to deal with decades of bureaucracy in their culture, and can really just say, well, how do we get from zero to space on a very consistent manner as fast as we can. So anyway, just some thoughts. And I don't know that for certain. That's just my speculation. But it's just a different environment that a lot of these companies have grown up in.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I thought that we should bring it up in the weekly is because in our interview, Peter Beck said that one of the unnoticed things from Q1 was how, like this analyst asked, like if Raytheon is quitting, then how can possibly Rocket Lab make it in this fixed price contract? And Peter Beck thought that was like a very significant thing. And I just feel that, when Starliner and the Dragon space capsule were going up against each other in Congress, then Boeing was arguing that, SpaceX doesn't know what they're doing and their stuff is held together by chewing gum and they're unserious. And, they risk the lives of the astronauts and Congress should not go with them, right? And then Congress decided to fund both the projects. And then Dragon is, I don't know, done since 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe earlier. And Starliner is still, after cost overruns, is not being able to launch. And now, in this last newspaper article, they found safety issues, and it looks like they're just going to launch anyways. So the next video we're going to see is the door flying off Starliner instead of the Alaskan Airlines. So it's just it seems like there is a lot of change coming in the space industry.
Yeah, and it's interesting because if you were to say that they don't have competent people in ULA, you'd be wrong. Tory Bruno, if you've ever watched, there's a really good video, Smarter Every Day, where they literally walk through from beginning to end. I remember watching it and I was just in amazement. Tory Bruno walking through, and it's split up into 1 or 2 hour long conversations with Tory Bruno walking through the ULA facility, and the guy's just a fucking wizard. So I don't think it's for lack of capability, but at the same time, it's are these guys standing on the shoulders of their predecessors to be able to get to where they're at? Do they actually have the capability? But I just know that, Tory is a legend in his own right. And so it's interesting because if you look at that video, you'd be like, man, these guys are really churning it out. So I just don't understand. I don't understand where
I mean, what I have seen in articles before is that, as you said, it's a culture and bureaucracy, because SpaceX, they blow up rockets on what do you call it, on the test stands, and that's their thing. Elon Musk is even saying, if you're not blowing up rocket engines, you're not testing enough. And you know, like when the government is commissioning you to build something, and then there is a video of it blowing up on the pad, I think a lot of US taxpayers are going like, was that my tax money like going up in flames? Like what is NASA doing, you know? And then they somehow, as you said, like they have to over engineer, and like their modus operandi is like, whatever with this design, it has to work on first try, and we cannot fail. And then, like, I mean, imagine if you had to land a rocket, like NASA orders a landing rocket, and then it has to land like the first time you try it. Yeah, then it takes you 50 years with engineers to go through all the possible scenarios before you even attempt landing a rocket, right? So I think it's something like, it's not the talent, it is the culture and their way of going about doing things, I guess. Cool. So yeah, I think this was everything this week. I don't know, do you want to go over anything that you, in your hiatus, is there any new things you're excited about with Rocket Lab? Are you more or less bullish, or are you gonna sell your Rocket Lab shares now to buy Airbnbs?
No, the Airbnbs take too much time, and I tried telling that to my sister who's involved in this one. I don't think she understood how much time it would be to set it up, and I tried explaining that quite a few times to her, and she thought I was just being mean, being like, you know, you just don't want me to have it. It's like, no, and I'm just forewarning you, it's a lot of work. But anyway, the conversation that we had with Peter continues to deepen my conviction for the company, that I truly honestly believe that they will be the number 2 end-to-end sort of space company, specifically in the United States for sure. And if you think about it from that perspective, that gives you a playground to play with in terms of valuation, from anywhere between $0 and market cap value, if everybody else fails other than SpaceX, to $200 billion. And so currently we're sitting at $2 billion. And so I could easily see a place where, with the contracts that start to get put into place with Neutron, etc., this could easily be a $20 to $30 billion company here in not too distant future. Not too distant for me means years, right? You know, easily 5 years, versus not too distant for others might mean 6 months. So I just wanted to caveat that. So to me, I think that we're kind of sitting in between this place where, if you have a few things continue to go right, the company's valuation will soon follow. I think, you know, the difference between 2 billion and 200 billion for SpaceX, I think, is too great. You know, yes, we are behind in terms of where SpaceX is in its journey. You know, they had their small launch vehicle. They've now kind of ceased that producing. Then they have their Falcon 9, which it seems like that they might also slowly let die as well. And now they're obviously focusing on Starship and you know, the Starliner as well. So my thought process is yeah, I don't. The difference between 2 billion and 200 billion is too great. One of them is either going to have to drop in valuation, meaning SpaceX, or one of them is going to have to come up in valuation. And my bet is that it's likely going to be Rocket Lab that has to go up in valuation here in the near future. I still have a price target of about 15 for year end of next year. So the next 18 months or so, I believe it'll get to $15. But that's obviously now impacted by the fact that Neutron's been delayed 6 months to 7 months now. So I might have to revisit that valuation once I do another article here for Seeking Alpha in the coming months. But I'm very confident that the company will continue to do well. And I'm sure between now and there's a lot to play with between now and when Neutron launches. You have to think not only are we going to develop 18 satellites for the Space Development Agency, but we have the opportunity to still bid for the launch of those 18 satellites as well. And then there's additional tranches that have yet to be awarded for the Space Development Agency that we can continue to bid for as well, coupled with the backlog of HASTE missions, which I think will start to flow through in the 2025 time period. As we really start to do a little bit more HASTE going into the second half of 2024 and the first half of 2025. So,
yeah, there's a lot of catalysts. I agree with you that Neutron delay is not helping the stock price, but there's so many contracts that we can get in before that. I hope the stock price is 15 by the end of 2025, but I'm also very patient. Like if it's still $4 in 2025, I will be just buying a lot more. By the way, Francisco just sent me something. Starship 24, who is a fantastic Twitter account who lives near Virginia, and he apparently visited Rocket Lab facilities today. So this is like really hot off the press, and we can see how the Neutron facilities are being built. Was this the last picture? Let me see. Yeah, this was the last picture. Yeah, so things are really happening when it comes to Neutron. I just want to see that freaking hot fire test. Something from the test, even if it's not the hot fire yet, something they should do more.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that as well, for sure.
Yeah. All right, everyone. I think that was it for this week. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and thank you, Matt, for being here. It was really like the good old times.
Thanks for the invite.
Are you going to be more back on YouTube, or you're still like?
I don't know. It really depends, you know. I think I would think I was burning myself out a little bit by doing as much as I was in the past. So I think I'm going to be more selective with what I do. I don't get paid for it. You know, a lot of this, even this, you know, Rocket Lab Weekly is something I do for the community. It's not for payment, right? So, you know, just acknowledging that I have a more important job on a 9-to-5 basis as well, and I have things that I can do to help add value to my own, you know, bank account. It's probably more prudent for me to focus on those things than focus on YouTube, where I might make $200 or $300 a month at best. So, you know, as much as it's nice to fantasize about a YouTube dream, you know, it doesn't pay off, right? It's more for the help of helping the community rather than helping yourself. So there's that piece, but it's not to say I'm done doing YouTube. It's just need be a little bit more selective about what I do, and doing it as frequently as I was.
Well, you're always welcome on the show. So, but it's understandable if you can't make it. Cool. Well, really enjoyed the day. Fantastic rocket launch. Great Rocket Lab Weekly. And see you everyone next week. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you all. Cheers.